Nobody in that courtroom knew that the spontaneous cross-examination she was performing had been rehearsed 112 times, because numbers had betrayed her since she was 7 years old. The Mask of Excellence. Chapter 1. The Cross-Examination. The courtroom smelled like old paper and cold coffee, and Monica Barksdale had learned to love that smell the way other people loved the smell of rain. It meant she was exactly where she belonged. "Ms. Barksdale, your witness," said Judge Renata Cole, and 40 pairs of eyes in the gallery of Denver's 2nd Judicial District Courthouse turned to watch a woman rise from the plaintiff's table as though she had all the time in the world. She didn't. She never did. She simply knew how to look like she did. Monica buttoned the single button on her charcoal blazer, a habit, not a flourish, though it read as one, and walked to the center of the courtroom without a single note card in her hand. No legal pad, no binder, nothing but a fountain pen clipped to her lapel pocket, which she never used and always wore, because a woman who might need to write something down in front of a jury was a woman who might be seen searching for a word she couldn't spell. "Dr. Whitfield," she said, "you testified on direct examination that the safety report your company issued in March of 2019 was, in your words, thorough and complete. Is that a fair summary of your testimony?" The witness, a silver-haired engineer who had spent 30 years testifying for corporations and had never once been rattled by a plaintiff's attorney, allowed himself the smallest smile. "That's correct." "You reviewed 41 internal maintenance logs before writing that report." "I did." 41 out of how many total logs existed for that facility in the 18 months prior? A pause. Not long, but Monica had spent a lifetime learning to read pauses the way other people read sentences, and she caught it the way a hawk catches a flinch in the grass 3 fields away. "I believe there were additional logs, yes." "How many, Dr. Whitfield?" "I don't have that number in front of me." "I do." Monica did not reach for a folder. She did not glance at opposing counsel's exhibit binder, 3 inches thick, sitting untouched at her own table. She simply said, 163 logs existed for that 18-month period. You reviewed 41 of them. That's exactly 25%. And of the 22 logs flagging the exact valve failure that caused this accident, you reviewed 0. The sampling methodology was standard for 0, Monica repeated quietly, and let the number sit there in the silence like a stone dropped into still water. She did not raise her voice. She never raised her voice. Raised voices asked juries to feel something on command, and Monica did not need to ask. She only needed to place the facts, one after another, in the order that made the truth impossible to avoid, because order was the one thing she had learned to master before she had learned almost anything else. Nobody in that courtroom knew what it had cost her to get there. Nobody knew that the spontaneous cross-examination she was performing had been rehearsed 112 times in the shower, in the car, into a voice recorder at 2 in the morning, until every number was not memorized in the ordinary sense, but burned into her like a brand, because if she had tried to read them off a page in front of a jury, the numbers might have swapped themselves, a 9 becoming a 6, a 4 sliding sideways into a 1. The way numbers and letters had betrayed her since she was 7 years old and did not yet have a name for the thing that was happening to her. Nobody knew that she had memorized all 163 log entries, not because it impressed people, though it did, but because for Monica, memorizing was more reliable than reading. A memorized fact did not rearrange itself. A memorized fact did not swim. Nobody knew, and that was exactly how she needed it to stay. She finished her cross-examination 40 minutes later without opening a single document, and when she sat down, her paralegal, a sharp, quiet woman named Adaeze Nwosu, slid a legal pad across the table with a single line written on it in neat block capitals. "You just won this case." Monica looked at the note for exactly as long as it took to read it, a beat longer than most people would need, though nobody watching would have noticed. And then she smiled the smile she had practiced since she was 17 years old, the one that said, of course, the one that said, I never doubted it, the one that covered, the way it always covered, the fact that underneath the charcoal blazer, her heart was going so hard she could feel it in her teeth. She had not slept the night before. She had been up until 4 a.m. rehearsing every number in this case out loud in the dark, alone, because a single misplaced digit in front of a jury could undo a year of work, and, more importantly, to the part of her that never fully relaxed, could reveal something she had spent 33 years making sure no one ever saw. That night, after the verdict came back for her client, $22 million, the largest safety liability verdict of the year in the state of Colorado, Monica Barksdale stood alone in the parking garage beneath her office, leaned her forehead against the cool concrete pillar beside her car, and let herself shake for exactly 90 seconds. Then she straightened her blazer, checked her reflection in the car window, and drove home to a house no one had ever been inside except the people who cleaned it, because even there she was still, in some way, performing for an audience of one. Herself, the one person she had never quite convinced. Chapter 2. The Girl Who Memorized the World. Long before she was Monica Barksdale, Esquire, before the corner office, before the verdicts, before the profile in the Denver Business Journal that called her the most feared cross-examiner in the Rocky Mountain West, she was just Monica, 7 years old, sitting in the third row of Mrs. Halloway's classroom at Meadowlark Elementary, staring at a page of words that would not hold still. The letters moved. That was the only way she could ever describe it, then or later. Not blurred, moved. The B in big would lean backward like it was trying to become a D. The word was would rearrange itself into saw halfway down a sentence, so that by the time she reached the period, she had read something entirely different from what was printed on the page, and had no idea. "Monica, please read the next paragraph," Mrs. Halloway said one Tuesday in October, and the classroom went quiet in the particular way a room goes quiet when 22 7-year-olds sense that something is about to go wrong for someone else, and are grateful, in the secret animal way of children, that it isn't them. Monica looked down at the page. The words swam. She opened her mouth and closed it again. "Take your time," Mrs. Halloway said, not unkindly, but the kindness had an edge to it, the edge of a teacher who has already decided, privately, what this means about a student, and is merely waiting for confirmation. Monica read 3 words, stopped, started again. A boy named Tyler snickered behind her, not loudly, just enough. "She can't even read," Tyler whispered to the boy beside him, and the words landed on Monica like a verdict, because 7-year-olds deliver verdicts more efficiently than any courtroom ever built. That night, Monica sat at the kitchen table with the same paragraph, and she did what she would do for the next 3 decades whenever the world moved too fast for her to catch. She slowed everything down until it broke into pieces small enough to hold. She read the paragraph 1 word at a time, covering the rest of the page with a ruler, so the other words couldn't sneak into view and rearrange themselves. It took her 40 minutes to read what her classmates had read in 4. By the time she finished, she had not just read the paragraph. She had memorized it. She could recite it forward, backward, and out of order, because somewhere in the 40 minutes of struggle, her brain had done something it would keep doing for the rest of her life. It had stopped trying to read the words and started, instead, building a structure to hold them, a private architecture of meaning that did not depend on the treacherous business of letters sitting still on a page. Her mother, Eleanor, a hospital records clerk, who worked long shifts and came home exhausted, noticed that Monica was struggling and did what generations of well-meaning parents had done before diagnostic language existed in the household vocabulary. She told Monica to try harder. "You're smart," Eleanor said, and she meant it as comfort. "You just need to focus." Nobody used the word dyslexia in that kitchen. Nobody used the word ADHD either, though it would have explained just as much. Why Monica could sit rapt and motionless for 6 hours, building an elaborate fort out of couch cushions and rope, tracking a dozen structural variables in her head without effort, and yet could not sit still for 6 minutes of assigned reading without her mind sliding sideways into something more interesting. Why she could remember, with photographic precision, the exact color of the shirt a substitute teacher wore 3 years earlier, and yet could not remember, no matter how many times she was told, which way the letter B faced. It was 1993. The vocabulary that would one day let a grown woman say, "I have a DHD and dyslexia," the way she might say, "I have brown eyes," flatly, factually, without shame, did not yet exist for a 7-year-old girl in a small Colorado school district. What existed instead was a story, quietly assembled by teachers and classmates alike, that Monica was not trying hard enough, that she was careless, that she was, perhaps, not as bright as she seemed when she talked, because when she talked, she was undeniably, unsettlingly sharp, quick with an argument, quick with a joke, able to hold 4 threads of a conversation in her head while her classmates struggled to hold one. "She's clearly smart," Mrs. Halloway told Eleanor at a parent-teacher conference, in the tone of someone delivering a diagnosis of moral failure disguised as praise. "Which is what makes the reading so puzzling. I think she just isn't applying herself." Monica, sitting in the hallway outside the classroom where she had been told to wait, heard every word through the door, the way children always hear the words, adults think they can't. She isn't applying herself. She would spend the next 15 years disproving that sentence so thoroughly, so relentlessly, that by the time she reached Harvard Law School, not applying herself would have become almost a private joke, if it hadn't still, somewhere underneath everything, felt true. By 9, Monica had developed her first system. She read every book twice, the first time for the shape of the story, the second time, slower, with a finger tracking beneath each line, for the actual words. By 11, she had learned to listen to audiobooks while following along on the page, so her ears could correct what her eyes got wrong before the mistake had time to take root. By 13, she had a memory system so refined that she could hear a page read aloud once and recall 90% of its content days later, even though she still could not reliably read that same page herself without her ruler, her finger, her private choreography of tricks that she performed in secret and never once let anyone see. She cried over books other children found effortless, not in front of anyone. Monica had learned early that tears, like mistakes, were data other people used against you. But alone, in her room, with the door closed, furious at a brain that seemed built to punish her for wanting to read the things she loved, because she did love them. That was the cruelest part, the part no one who watched her struggle ever seemed to understand. Monica did not hate books. She hated the gap between how much she loved stories and how hard her own mind fought her every time she tried to reach one. So she built a bridge across that gap, plank by plank, in secret, for years, and told no one it was there.